Hey everyone, welcome to Cooking with Colby. I'm Colby, and today we're going to be making a one skillet pork chop and vegetable recipe. It's a very easy recipe that comes together in under 45 minutes, and it can be a great dish for a weeknight, but also the shining star at your next dinner party. All of the ingredients I'm going to be using today I got from Food for People, and they can all also be purchased with CalFresh benefits. Let's get to it. Pork chops often get a bad rep for being dry, tough, and rubbery. To prevent that from happening, there are two things we're going to do today. Most importantly, we are not going to overcook our meat, but I'll talk more about that when we get to the cooking section. To start, we're going to brine our pork. A brine is simply a salt and water mixture, and it's going to help lock in the moisture so we end up with a juicier, more tender piece of meat in the end. For today, and for brines in the future, use a 1 tablespoon of salt to a 1 cup of water ratio. Since I have 2 pork chops, I'll be using 2 tablespoons of salt and 2 cups of water. You'll notice when you receive your pork from Food for People, there's 4 in the package. If you would like to use all 4, feel free to double this recipe. Add your 2 tablespoons of salt to a bowl, followed by 2 cups of water. Mix for a minute or so until there's no salt crystals remaining. Place your unfrozen meat into the bowl. Oops. And we're going to let this sit at room temperature for 30 minutes to 1 hour. Depending on the thickness of your meat, you can brine it for up to 4 hours. If you do choose to brine for longer than 2 hours though, make sure you do it in the fridge because we don't want our meat or any cooked products to be sitting at room temperature for more than 2 hours, as it increases the chance of foodborne illness. You'll also notice when you receive your package that the pork is very frozen. If you are able to, defrost it in the fridge in a dish to catch any juices for 24 hours. But if you don't have that much time, it's always okay to defrost it in the microwave. While our pork sits in the brine, we're going to chop our vegetables. Today, I'll be using 2 potatoes, 1 small onion, 1 carrot, 1 head of broccoli, and 2 cloves of garlic. We're going to mince the garlic, and everything else we'll chop into bite-sized pieces. A trick for mincing garlic is to bring your cloves onto the cutting board, put your knife flat, and we're going to crush them with the flat side of our knife, like so. There we go. Now you'll see the skin just comes right off. Do it again for the second clove. Now we're going to mince it. Mince simply means to chop very small. When I cut, I'm going to make a bit of a claw, so instead of my fingers being right next to the blade, like that, I'm going to put my knuckles against the blade and my fingers are hidden back like this. It's a great safe chopping technique that should always be used. You'll notice that I put my broccoli in a separate bowl, and that's because all of these vegetables are going to go into the pan at one time, and the broccoli is going to go in a little later. To ensure a really flavorful pork chop, we're going to make a very simple dry rub. For this dry rub, we'll be using pepper, salt, garlic powder, and fresh rosemary. The garlic powder and the rosemary are totally optional, as these are items we don't generally give out at the pantry, but they are covered with CalFresh benefits. Feel free to substitute these spices and herbs for anything that you have on hand or your favorite types of herbs and spices. We're going to start with 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. followed by 1/4 teaspoon of salt. We want to prevent this from being too salty as we've already brined it and we will be using chicken stock later. So just a little bit of salt here. And 1/2 teaspoon of the garlic powder. This rosemary was given to me by a coworker. Thank you, Julie. And it came out of her garden, so it's extra yummy. We'll use about a 1/2 teaspoon of minced rosemary. And again, to mince, just like we did with the garlic, we're just gonna chop it really finely using that claw figuration. It can be a relatively rough mince. All right, now we're gonna mix this all together. You could just do it with a spoon or your hands like so. And we'll use this in just a moment on our brined pork. After the pork chops have sat in the brine for 30 minutes to 1 hour, we are going to rinse them. Usually, I do not recommend washing meat, as doing so can spread harmful bacteria to your sink and counters. But in this case, we need to rinse off the brine, so we're going to wash them. Then pat dry with a paper towel. Be sure to wash and sanitize your sink and surrounding areas after you are done. Season both sides of the meat with the dry rub. You'll notice I'm using a different cutting board than I was before, and that's because if you can, it's a good idea to have 2 cutting boards in your kitchen, one for meat and one for everything else to avoid cross-contamination. Heat 1 tablespoon of cooking oil over high heat in a skillet. Add the pork chops when the oil is warm and cook 2 to 3 minutes per side. They will not be cooked all the way through. Then remove from heat and set aside. Reduce the heat to medium and in the same pan, heat another 2 tablespoons of cooking oil. Add the potatoes, carrots, onions, and garlic and give them a good stir so they are all evenly coated in the oil, scraping up any browned bits from the bottom of the pan. Cook until the onions are translucent or the garlic starts to brown. Add 1 cup of chicken or vegetable broth or water. Bring to a boil and cook for 15 to 20 minutes or until potatoes are easily pierced with a fork. While our vegetables cook, let's talk about cooking our pork properly so we don't get a tough, chewy piece of meat. The best way to assess when your pork is done is with one of these. This is an instant read thermometer, and I got this online for 10 or 12 bucks. An old traditional meat thermometer will also do the trick, and those are around $5 to $7. These are a really, really good tool to have in the kitchen, and once you buy it, it'll last you for years. Before I had a thermometer, I would cut into my meat to check the color and the doneness that way. But what I didn't know was that when the meat is still hot like that, all those juices that we use the brine for, that we want to be sealed in, that make a tender, juicy piece of meat, when you cut in and the meat is hot like that, all those juices come out and you get a tougher, more rubbery piece of meat in the end. So we want to avoid cutting into the meat before it's had time to cook fully and rest. If you don't have a thermometer though, this is a little trick that you can also use for steak. You're gonna hold up your palm like this and feel this pad right here under your thumb. It's very soft and fleshy right now. That's what the feeling of raw meat is generally like. When you touch your thumb to your pointer finger, this is what a rare piece of meat feels like. Medium rare, medium well, and well done. By the time you get over to well done, it's pretty tough. So we don't want our meat to be that tough. We want it to be in this ring finger, medium well stage. When your potatoes are easily pierced with a fork, stir in the broccoli and cook, covered, for 5 minutes. Add the pork and cook for another 5 minutes until the internal temperature reaches at least 145 degrees Fahrenheit or feels similar to medium well on the hand test. Then remove from heat and let stand at least 5 minutes before serving. This is what today's final product will look like when served on a plate and ready to be enjoyed. This recipe is a good source of iron and an excellent source of vitamins A and C. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Cooking with Colby, a Food for People production.